we have a new Avantasia album coming out. And I'm really excited for it. It's called, the name of the album is called Here Be Dragons. I'm going to read you the press release and the quote from Tobias Sammet really quick. He says, "This new album carries the most adventurous and bold spirit my music has had in decades. And it's rather reckless, fearless, powerful, and uplifting, and not introverted at all. While my previous albums allowed me to get a lot off my chest, this time I dove headfirst into the creative flood, crafting 10 discrete musical pictures that miraculously merged into what I believe is the tightest chapter in Avantasia's history. I did everything exactly how I wanted it, approaching the album with unrelenting determination and a carefree attitude that was reminiscent of my early days way before the metal opera thing, when I felt unstoppable and let instinct just write songs. Right now, I'm bursting with energy and can't wait to unleash Here Be Dragons and then kick off the big tour with our new stage. We'll present the new material alongside our classics and some rarities in the most spectacular stage show Avantasia has ever delivered. An early Merry Christmas to everybody." There's a lot to take from that. First of all, where he says he had unrelenting determination and a carefree attitude. I can tell you flat out right now, having hosted this show for almost 27 years, I had Tobias Sammet on my show a lot in the early days, and he is not wrong when it came to unrelenting determination. So I'm going to tell you guys a story. Before I get into this album, I'm going to tell you guys a story, a pre-Avantasia story. So I just mentioned earlier, I used to work for Halloween. And I remember, now he wasn't in the band at the time, obviously, but in 1999, I interviewed Michael Kiske. And, back then, it was one of those things where you ended up getting people's phone numbers, right? You would call them and then you do the interview over the phone. That's kind of how things were done, 25, 26 years ago. Okay. And I interviewed Michael Kiske, and I put that interview online, and obviously it aired on my show. And I had Tobias Sammet on my show quite a bit. In fact, Tobias Sammet, to me, when he talks about unrelenting determination, I'll be honest with you, some of the stories he told me about when it went into the Vainglory Opera album and how it was produced, etc. I mean, it is the epitome of unrelenting determination. This dude, I remember first listening to that Vainglory Opera album, and back then you didn't have streaming. You didn't have any of that stuff. And I remember contacting AFM Records, which had no distribution over here in the United States at all. And the internet was still mostly dial-up. So you didn't have it wasn't fast enough to really stream a lot of music the way that it does now. So I can attest to that unrelenting determination. Now, to go back to the previous statement I made, I had Michael Kiske on my show. This is 1999. He had a second solo album that had come out called Readiness to Sacrifice, and had a very long conversation. And again, when you do these interviews with people, they get your phone number, you get their phone number. It's just what happened. And you just had to be a journalist, and you just didn't give it out to anybody. So one morning, it was a Saturday morning, I get this phone call. And, it's got to be 9 a.m. on a Saturday, 8 a.m. I think it was pretty early. And I get the phone. Someone gives me the phone. They were asking for me, and it was Tobias Sammet. And he was asking me for Michael Kiske's phone number. Now, I'm going to be honest with you. Being very new at this, I was very hesitant to give him that, because when you get these phone numbers, you are explicitly told you cannot give them to anybody. So I said, look, I can't give it to you, but maybe I could give you the phone number of somebody who can give it to you. This is how I worked around this. So I remember calling Roland Grappo, who was in Halloween at the time. I said, Roland, this dude wants Kiski's number. I don't want to give it to him. Maybe if he calls you, maybe you can give it to him. Can I give him your phone number? And Roland said yes. So I call Tobias Sammet back. I tell him, look, this is Roland Grappo's number. He can give you the number. And I did that because I wanted to wash my hand. I did not want to give him the number because if Michael Kiske were to blow up on him or get mad, he's going to know probably where Tobias Sammet maybe got the phone number from. Now, granted, in 1999, it was like I was 20, 21 years old at the time. And so I was young and inexperienced. And I'm going to tell you why I'm glad I didn't give him the number and why I sent him to Roland here in a second. But he called Roland Grappo up, ended up getting Kiske's number. And the rest, as they say, is history. Maybe he got Marcus Grafskopf's number. I don't know. But all of a sudden, shortly after that, you hear about Avantasia, the metal opera. And there's a guy named Ernie, which, of course, was Michael Kiske. Funnily enough, years later, Michael Kiske comes on this show. And I had met him a couple times. I never really had really said anything to him about this, but off the record, I told him this story. And ironically, when I was telling him about it, he said, if I had called Michael Kiske and told him who wanted the number, he said he might have said no back then. I just think I just thought that was interesting. Now, granted, he had no idea who Tobias Sammet was at the time. So that was the other hesitation. And you might ask, why didn't I call Kiske and say, hey, this guy wants your number? Again, I didn't know him that well. And I still really don't know him that well to where I could just call the guy up and be like, hey, this dude wants your number. I don't know why, but he wants your phone number. So the rest, as they say, is history, but I didn't know anything about Avantasia or rock opera or anything like that until it obviously was announced and he was on it. So just a funny bit of history some of you may or may not know. And I actually found something really funny. I'll probably touch on this in a future podcast. I have a really funny prank call Tobias Sammet did where he called in on the air on a radio show and messed with Marcus Grafskopf. It was about 25 years ago. It was around the time The Dark Ride came out. But I will probably get to that later on. And maybe I'll bring that out. Who knows? But anyhow, back to Avantasia. You know, the interesting part about it, and every time I go on social media, I always look at, people will ask and bring this up quite often. And they say, wow, when is another Ed Guy album going to come out? Right? And the way I look at Avantasia is kind of what Ed Guy became. Kind of in the same manner as Trans-Siberian Orchestra is what the band Sabotage became. It's sort of evolved into that. And that's the same way I look at Ed Guy. Because Avantasia is absolutely phenomenal. And as these Avantasia albums ended up getting better, I thought, with the exception of maybe the album Space Police, I thought Ed Guy albums were kind of, they were not getting worse, but they weren't as good as the early stuff. But the Avantasia albums are getting better. They're getting better. The songwriting's getting better. And so it makes sense that, why would Tobias Sammet, and this is for the people that have brought this up, why wouldn't he put 110% effort into Avantasia? You have all these great singers, and that's kind of how I look at that. I know there's some of you that wish an Ed Guy album would come out, but truthfully, I am glad things are the way they are. Now, the last Ed Guy album, I believe, was Space Police. I thought that was actually a very good album. But in a sense, with Avantasia, you're getting not only the Avantasia stuff, but you do get a lot of the elements that made Ed Guy great. And so when he goes and says something in this press release that says, I felt unstoppable and let instinct just write the songs, I truly believe, and this is my gut feeling, that this next Avantasia album could possibly be the best one they've ever done. I know that's a bold statement. In my opinion, Avantasia has never put anything out that was ever bad or that sucked. Everything they've done is phenomenal. And the one thing Tobias Sammet has, and one of the biggest talents that he has, and it's not a talent that every musician has. He has the ability to pick out the right singers and the right musicians, and he has the ability to write music that fits their voice. Now, folks, not many people have a talent like that. You know, I always talk about Ian Lucas and Averion having that talent. Tobias Sammet has that talent too. And when you look at the body of work that this man has done since the mid-90s, it is absolutely phenomenal. I remember hearing Vainglory Opera, folks, for the first time, and I thought to myself, this band is going places. Tobias Sammet is going places. This is a guy that is going to be immensely successful. And Avantasia is going to probably be one of the greatest things that's ever happened to the metal scene. And you know what? It has been. Like, I went back the other day and was listening to all of the Avantasia albums from the first album to the most recent one. I can't find a bad album in that discography. And I am really excited to hear that his attitude towards this is very similar to the early days. Because, folks, I can tell you, talking to this man on the phone, Tobias Sammet, the intensity, the desire to really make great music, and having fun making that music, man, it was there. It was funny because he's like a month younger than I am. So I'll be honest. I'm really excited, and I think this next Avantasia album is going to be phenomenal. I can't wait for the first lyric video. I cannot wait for the first bit of music from this. But I think this could be one of, if not their best album. That is my gut feeling. Looking at that statement, and the way he said he's approaching the album, folks, I'm excited. Hey everybody, Tony here from the Metal Command Podcast. Again, I appreciate your support. Since 1998, I have hosted this show in one form or another, starting off in radio and now in the podcast format. Again, thanks for watching, and if you like what you see and hear on this show, by all means, please hit the subscribe button, hit the little bell to be notified anytime I do post a video, and if you see this program on any other form of social media, please give me a follow there. Again, I always appreciate your support.